So, I literally just got finished watching what is supposedly one of the most disturbing movies, and by movies I mean an actual movie with a narrative and everything, not just a film. One of the most disturbing movies ever made. Let's talk about it. Now, I know they say curiosity killed the cat, but how am I gonna call myself a movie buff, a reviewer, or whatever, if I've never seen the worst of the worst, the most disturbing of the most disturbing movies? So I started doing some research, and list after list I kept seeing the same movie near the top, a Serbian film. Others that floated near the top were movies like The River of Fundament, which is a 5-hour and 20-minute long surrealist film about human waste that apparently it's essentially unwatchable. A Serbian film, however, sounds like a horror movie. It sounds like Hostel on steroids, or Hostel on bull, Viagra, and speed. That might be more appropriate. You will learn why later. So, against my better judgment, I sat down to watch a Serbian film. This is not an endorsement. I do not think this is a good movie. However, it ended up being better than I expected, which I will explain. Then at the end of this video, I'm gonna give you recommendations on some disturbing movies that I think are quite good. So the movie opens up with what appears to be, I don't know, a 6-year-old watching hardcore porn. Right off the bat, this movie's letting you know it's not messing around. So then his father walks in, and it's the same guy in the movie. So we're 1 minute in, our main character is an ex-porn star who doesn't mind if his little kid watches daddy work. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the hero of your movie. Not your movie, because you shouldn't watch it. The movie... Moving on, his wife's there too, and she's just sort of mildly frustrated with him. And at this point, I don't know if this is some weird cultural thing that I don't understand, or if she's just the most patient woman in the world. Because he's clearly eager to get back into the business. He keeps all of his tapes real handy right next to the TV where he can get to them quick. In fact, they're so handy that before bed, he pours himself a glass of whiskey, puts on one of his own movies, and gets in bed next to his wife, not to watch it together. She's busy translating something for work, and he's just sort of casually watching himself two women. So he's watching himself work while his wife works. Legend. And apparently he's like one of the greatest porn stars ever. His wife talks about it. Other people talk about how just extraordinary he was at his craft. We'll call it craft for the remainder of the video. And it actually checks out that the guy would be hard up for cash, that he wouldn't have a lot of money, because guys in porn do not get paid a lot of money. If they did, if guys in porn made a lot of money, the entire global economy would collapse. Marriage rates would drop, birth rates would drop, humanity might cease to exist after, I don't know, a generation or two at best. So the guy's broke, he needs money, and that's another point. He can't provide for his family. It's just, we're gonna talk about all the points as to why, like, you shouldn't care what happens to this guy. So the gist of the story is he's offered an insane amount of money to come back to work, even though there's multiple side comments where they talk about him doing little crappy movies for just pocket change when he needs money. Again, the guy can't get a... I realize he's an ex-porn star and can't just get any job, but he could get, like, any job to pay for his family. But they sort of blow over that too. I don't quite understand why it's even a thing, and it's clearly a ton of money. Like, it's an offer he can't refuse, basically. And it sounds like it's gonna be okay. There's probably something questionable going on, because they're not really telling him what it's about, but they have a very good reason. They tell him, relax, you're a porn star who's worried about what the porno's about. That logic kind of checks out. And the movie's got a heavy porn theme. It's got multiple creepy porn people in it, and I'm not downing on people who watch porn. I'm not even downing on people who watch a lot of it, or even people who watch way too much of it. I'm downing on people who are way too into it. And I don't just mean into it like you watch it, I mean like into it the way people are into Star Wars. Ugh. Ugh. But our guy does seem to ask all the right questions. But folks, when something seems way too good to be true, it is. It's always too good to be true. And he does try to tell his wife something doesn't seem right, I'm not sure about it, and she pushes him to do it. So maybe she's not patient, maybe she's just stupid. She's definitely on the spectrum at this point in the movie. I'm sold on that. And for all the porno talk of rhythm and pace, this movie has none of it. The creators here, it's just chopped up like He's hanging out with his kid one minute and then going to do this awful thing with weird dark music the next. And it's not artistically done, it's just sort of like ham-fisted into a movie. Because here we are 30 minutes in, nothing horrible has happened. And I'm not aware of it. It seems like something horrible is about to happen. It's not. It's not. He shows up to the set. A man in tactical gear with a sidearm is filming him. They give him an earpiece and just tell him to walk into what at this point I'm hoping and praying is an abandoned orphanage. I'm not hoping it's an orphanage. It definitely is an orphanage. I'm hoping it's an abandoned orphanage. Okay, so day one of filming, nothing horrible happened to him. He hasn't been dismembered or anything. Nobody's bleeding, but clearly something horrible is going on and he chooses not to pull out. There's gotta be a better way to say that. There's gotta be about 100 better ways to say that for this video. So, first day of filming is in the can, dude goes home, and they give us a big reveal at this point that his wife's ex-boyfriend is his brother. So this poor excuse for a father who can't even get a job to help support his family stole this beautiful woman who may or may not be on the spectrum, probably is, from his own brother who he still sees and is close with. So for those of you keeping score at home, lets his kid watch porn, doesn't provide for his family, stole his brother's girlfriend, has a drinking problem, there's more coming. And I'm not even judging the guy for being a porn star. Let's keep that in mind. I'm giving him no judgment on that. I'm judging him based on everything else he does and doesn't do in his life. And that's the big problem with this movie. I don't care what happens to this guy at any point. I'm never scared for this guy's life. I don't hate him or anything, but I could not care less about this guy. And you made me do that with the script. If anything, I'm starting to root for a little bit of carnage at this point. We're almost an hour into the movie, nothing bad has happened, and this guy's a total piece of shit who kind of has something coming, clearly. So the film project, we're gonna call it a film project from now on, is getting darker. He's starting to have nightmares about it. He's worried kids are gonna be involved, so he decides he wants to quit. But he can't do it over the phone like a normal person, like his wife asks him to, which maybe she's not stupid. I don't know, I'm so confused right now. So he goes in person, and I gotta say, he actually does a good job. He shuts it down, he's ready to go, but this guy cannot turn down a glass of whiskey to save his life. Nothing bad probably would have happened to him if he just turned down the whiskey. We're gonna let it go, we're gonna let it go. There's no reason he would have drank the whiskey, but we're gonna let it go. So then as they're leaving, the director's escorting him out, he's quit, everything seems fine. The director mentions how this guy, at some point, we don't know, there weren't many details, locked a midget woman, his words, not mine, in an oven and forced her to days it sounded like? So the list is getting longer. So can't support his family. And by the way, on that note, guy, you're the most famous porn star in the world. Do what any logical person would do in that scenario. Start a podcast. But also, alcoholic, lets his kid watch porn, watches porn in his bed with the wife that he stole from his own brother, and then locked a midget, again, his words, not mine, woman in an oven with a hole in it so that he could apparently get his for days on end. Yeah, no, I'm ready and rooting for something bad to happen to this guy at this point. And you're not supposed to, I don't think. So he didn't turn on the whiskey, he's driving home, he starts to feel drugged. A sexy nurse walks literally out of nowhere, and he starts to turn into a maniac, and he's drugged. Cut to, he wakes up in his own bed 3 days later, with a significant amount of blood and dirt on him, has no idea what happened. Here is where things start to get interesting again, because he goes back to the place with a tire iron, and I'm ready for him to start laying waste to this place. But what happens is this place is empty, he starts to go through these different rooms, and he's reliving and sort of remembering what happened in these rooms because he's seeing blood on the wall. And here's where things get really rough. This is where things start to happen in the movie that I'm not going to repeat on YouTube. It's violent, it's gory, it's sexually explicit, but what we do learn is that he was given a mixture of bull Viagra and speed, which apparently did not alter the taste of his whiskey. But as the intensity is ramping up and more things are starting to happen and he's remembering things, we run into my biggest gripe with the movie. It doesn't do a good job of building tension at all. It puts all its eggs into the shock value basket, but doesn't shock you with surprises too much. There's a few, but there's no real tension building up or anything. They're just sort of hitting you over the head with this movie like a hammer. Not the best cinematic experience ever. What Michael Bay does with computer-generated robots, a Serbian film does with rape and murder. I mean, I've seen less awful things on screen that shook me a lot more than the things in this movie because they were presented in a way that was clever and effective, and none of that's going on in this movie. I'm going to tell you about some of those movies shortly, but let's finish a Serbian film first. And the gore, when you do see it, is no more shocking than like a gore fest type of a horror movie. It's rough stuff, but I've seen worse in Peter Jackson movies. This is more, the sexual debauchery is kind of more the awful stuff that's in this movie. And it's rough stuff. There is a weird moment where this crazy, and I mean the director is a crazy person, not the director of the movie. That person's clearly an insane person too, but the director of the thing that he's watching in the movie is psychotic and goes on this whole rant about monks who do these weird things to goats and then make bread spread, I think is what the translation was in the subtitles. Bread spread, the best bread spread out of goat semen and goat's milk. I Googled it, and I did step into a lane of cooking with semen. There's quite a bit of that on the internet. I didn't know that existed when I started this project. Don't worry, I sent the links to the authorities. Those people will probably be behind bars soon, but nothing about the goats and monks and semen. I couldn't find anything. It was a weird thing to make up for the movie. It didn't add to the movie. It didn't make any sense. It's just weird. I mean, the reason I even questioned it is because his description of what they actually do, just from a practicality standpoint, didn't make any sense. I don't know. Let's move on. So we finally get to the climax of the movie. It's easily the worst part of the movie. What you see happen and what happens to him and what he does to other people is awful. Yet again, no real build-up, and this whole sequence, again, I can't give you details because we're on YouTube, this whole sequence has a major twist, technically a couple of little twists in it. You see them coming a mile away, and that's not just me being like, oh, my brain is so big, I know so much about movies. It's one of the most obvious twists I've ever seen, takes all the sting out of it, there's no impact, it's just awful and gross. Like, since the time that he woke up, you know his family's missing, he's looking for them, they're clearly in the room, as soon as you see them, you know it's them because of stature. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't understand why they thought this was a dramatic twist, because it's not, and it's just gross, dude. Gross, dude. But not only did they not actually build tension going into the scene, it's a horrible human being, so we don't care what happened to him, and it's a flashback. So all the mojo was taken out of this, which is probably a good thing in retrospect. I didn't need this to be any more intense than it was. But in terms of its efficacy, it fucking sucks, dude. But I told you I was going to tell you about some other movies that are, I think, much more effective in how disturbing they are, and they do serve more of a purpose. One of them is Gaspar Noé's Irreversible. This stars Monica Bellucci and Vincent Cassel, and is a really well-done movie, but it is graphic and upsetting and will stick with you. In this movie, Monica Bellucci plays a woman who is brutally raped, and then her boyfriend and friend sort of go on the rampage after that. Yet the events of the movie are played out in reverse, very much like Christopher Nolan's Memento. That is not only a gimmick, it actually functions pretty well in the storytelling. And the entire movie isn't overly disturbing. A lot of it is, but the rape scene is particularly well done. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's all done in one shot, which makes it very grim, very intense, and gives it, I think, the appropriate amount of weight. This is a movie about rape and the repercussions of it, and it's effective as such, and very disturbing. I saw it years ago, and it has stayed with me. And all of Gaspar Noé's work is pretty shocking. That's the one that has shocked me the most. And then you've got Lars von Trier, who did nothing but disturbing movies. More recently, The House That Jack Built, which is a movie I've recommended, but only for audience that are not sensitive at all. It's a really intense movie and has moments in it that are much more intense than anything in a Serbian film. However, I think his most disturbing movie is Antichrist. I had a rough time with this one. Overall, it's also kind of a shit movie that it leans real heavy on symbolism, but is a very disturbing watch, and again, was more artfully done and was more effective as a result. Director Ben Wheatley's movie Kill List features somewhat similar elements. There's not the sex element in it at all, so it's less disturbing from that aspect, but there are quite a few moments that top anything in a Serbian film because the storytelling is there. They've told you the story in the right way where there's a much bigger impact from some horrific events. The ending of this movie is still with me, and it's probably been close to 10 years since I've seen it. Overall, while there are multiple very disturbing moments in it, it's not a terribly disturbing film from beginning to end, but the moments that get you are gonna get you, and they're gonna hang on to you for a bit. And then finally, I'll say this is the least disturbing movie I've talked about this entire video, but probably the most effective one is Old Boy. Not only do I love this movie and think it's really well done, by the way, I'm talking about the original, not the Spike Lee remake, which I think is easily his worst movie, Josh Brolin's worst movie, possibly Samuel L. Jackson's worst movie, which is hard to say because he's done so many movies, but the original Korean Old Boy. The things that happen to the main character in this movie, I think are worse than the things that happen in a Serbian film. On paper, they're I don't know, it's hard to say, but the delivery, the point is, the delivery of the things that happen in Old Boy is way more effective than in a Serbian film. Like I said, a Serbian film is just whacking you over the head with it. Old Boy, and some of the other ones I'm talking about here, sort of trick you. They lull you into some false security at times, and then they hit you over the head with it, and it works really, really well. I'm not necessarily giddy about disturbing things in movies, but when it's done right, and it's effective, and it gets its hooks in you, and they stay in you, man, I marvel at the filmmaking technique at that, and then watching something like a Serbian film, it's pretty half-assed to say the least. It's one of the worst movies I've watched in a while, and I've watched some bad movies for you guys to do this channel. That said, these videos are a lot of work, so likes, comments, and shares are always appreciated. While you're leaving a comment, help me thank the Patreon supporters. They've been such good sports for so long. They're the reason I get to do different interesting things like this particular video. There's also a link down there where you can become a channel member and get access to exclusive reviews right here on YouTube. But I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this special disturbing episode, and you will see me on the next one.